the funding mechanism. Under neoliberalism, which is called basically new public management in higher education research, we have two well-known types of funding policies, like performance-based budgeting and funding. Actually, this performance-based budgeting funding project allocate funding based on performance in the past. So you did good job last year, then you will receive more funding. That's the performance-based budgeting and funding project. And another one is contract funding. Contract funding is based on performance in the future. That means I will do this kind of activities in the future, and then please give me your money. That's a contract funding. So we include both performance-based budgeting funding and contract funding. Both are in the category of the neoliberal funding mechanisms in our study. Basically, this type of neoliberalism or new public management, they encourage competition between universities, between national universities and also between national universities and private universities. So competition is a core funding mechanism in this funding policies. But the problem is, if one university receives more funding than other universities, then the other university will lose their money, right? It is kind of a zero-sum game because total is already set by the government. According to the funding data in South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, competition-based funding has enormously increased last a couple of decades. In South Korea, it was 11.2% in 1995, but it increased 40.5% in 2018. Taiwan is from 5% to the 44% now in the criteria of 2018. Japan, it was 18%, and then it increased to 23%. So that South Korea, Taiwan, both countries are heavily relying on competition-based funding under neoliberalism. And then both countries applied the serious selection and concentration logic. That means if you are selected, then you get funding. If you're not selected, no money, right? So that's a selection and concentration logic, especially the selection and concentration logic applied in world-class university initiative. The University of Sains Malaysia received the first funding for world-class university initiative, right? So that's the only one. And then blurring boundary between private and public sector so that public university compete with private university. In South Korea, the money for private university was 13%, 14%, but now it's 39%, almost 40%. In Taiwan, 8% to 40%. That means the private university, they are benefit from the competition-based funding policy because private university is much more efficient in terms of management, right? So that they get more money from the competition-based funding policy. Two policy issues under regarding the neoliberal funding policy. One question is whether institutional performance has been increased after state adopt a performance-based funding policy. It's questionable actually. According to the many literature review, there's no clear positive evidence from the literature review. Okay, and then the next question is whether funding side is really depending on institutional performance. It is also a little bit questionable. So that this study is trying to address the second issue through this collaborative project. According to the US case, let's say formally they say 10% of budget is linked with institutional performance, but we don't know about what is a real percent, it's formal percentage. After 2010, US state also adopted performance-based funding, a little bit aggressive funding policy, but still the proportion is relatively smaller because most states apply the performance-based funding from a little bit loosely linked system. So funding and institutional performance is not directly linked. Let me see some cases. According Debro in 2020, this research analyzed OECD countries, whether each country adopt the performance-based funding. And then actually the performance-based funding has three categories. One is performance reporting. Second one is performance budgeting. Third one is performance funding. Means it's not clear, but performance reporting means that the government asks individual universities to report their own performance, but their performance is not linked to the budget allocation. That's the performance reporting. In Debro's perspective, it is named as performance presentation, right? Presentation and reporting, same meaning. Second one, performance-based budgeting. In Debro's term, it is performance-informed budgeting. This means institutional performance is not directly linked with budget allocation. The third one, performance funding, means it is directly linked performance with budget allocation. So among the OECD countries, 30 OECD countries included in the analysis, only 8 countries adopt this policy, but majority of them just adopt the performance budgeting. That means in Korea, in Japan, we do not directly link the institutional performance and budget allocation. Although we consider institutional performance within our budget allocation, but it is not tight direct link between two. In South Korea, we adopt the performance competition-based funding in 1994, and Taiwan adopted competition-based funding in 1995. But Taiwan little bit moved away from the competition-based funding in recent days after current administration on the power, political power. Analytical model, we have from the South Korea, we have 142 universities for our analysis, and in Taiwan, 100 universities. And then we analyze the funding that each individual university received from the Ministry of Education. Each individual university might receive funding from other ministries, like Ministry of Science and Technology, but we did not consider that type of funding from other ministries. We only consider Ministry of Education because Ministry of Education allocate funding for general education and research, not for specific industrial development. Dependent variable. In our analysis in South Korea, funding in 2017, because after 2018, our government slightly reshuffled our policy, funding policy. So our dependent variable is 2017. And in Taiwan case, 2016, the new government adopted a different policy, right? So that our dependent variable is 2015. Model development, we have our baseline model, which predict the funding size by public or private location, whether you are in metropolitan area or in local area, whether you are in research university or non-research university. These are baseline model. And then institutional size is very critical for funding allocation, so that we have institutional size variable, number of undergraduate student, graduate student. Historical factor, if you receive huge amount of money for special purpose for your own university, then next year you expect that size of funding, minimum that size of funding from the government, right? So the historical factor is very critical. We set the historical factor in 2003 and 2004, each for South Korea and Taiwan, because after 2003 or 2004, we expect huge, great increase of the competition-based funding, right? Before that, although we adopt the competition-based funding, the funding increase is slight money, small money. But after 2003 or 4, we expect huge increase of the performance-based funding. And then we measure the institutional performance by graduate employment. It's undergraduate, mainly undergraduate student employment after their graduation, and research productivity measured by local journal publication and international journal publication. And now we are ready to hear from our two presentations, the finding section of their own analysis. I would be happy to invite Sophia and Robin to present and share their findings from their own analysis. After that, Dr. Lee will present about the Korean case too. Okay, I will close my share screen. Okay, now you're ready.
Microphone, Robin.
Oh yeah, it's work. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So our dear chair, section chair, Dr. Wang, and our coordinator, Professor Shin from Seoul National University. Thank you for giving us very detailed explanation on this co-working project. So as you may see from the topic, we work together with Seoul National University, working on the different sides of funding provided by both governments. So this is me, Wan Chang from National Chen University, and my colleague, Sophia, she's from Taipei City University. Pardon me, because at the same time, I still have my summer course to run. So I'm gonna, finish my presentation and leave the question to my lovely colleague, to all of you. So this is my content of my presentation. Professor Shin, he mentioned about we use 2015 to check the financial support from 2004. But I would like to add another data of 2019 to make a further comparison. Later on, I will report why do we need to list two different data. So back to our higher educational history. I think, sorry, first of all, I have to present our objectives. One of the purpose of this study is to compare these two different years from financial support of 2015 and 2019 with the same independable variable financial support from 2004. And we would like to check, because in 2015, we are dominated by KMT, which is more right-wing oriented. And then till 2016, the government was handed over to another party, DPP, which is more toward left-winged. So I want to check these two different ideological parties. Do they have different policies on higher education? So this is one of the reasons I want to make these two different data sets to compare. As Professor Shin, he just mentioned, we use 100 higher educational institutes to do the comparison and data collecting, of which are 45 from public and 55 from private. So from 2001 to 2004, ruled by KMT, we try to promote our university, our higher education, and more toward like Martin Troll's elite university, elite higher education. Only few elite universities can be supported. So we have a term like research university. And until 2006, another clear term comes up from the government, top university. So now we have a top university program initiated by KMT party. However, until 2016, because the government was handed over to DPP, these two different parties, because they have different ideologies, KMT is more like to support focused universities. Only selected university can be funded. Not like DPP, it's more like left wing. So it's more like justice. destructive justice. So they more toward like to support every university in Taiwan. So they initiate another policy entitled Sprout, Sustained Progress and Rise of University in Taiwan. So this is more for every university, not selected universities. So we want to compare if these two different types, are there any difference or outcomes from these two different types of funding support? So according to JC's model, we also analyze model 1 from baseline to model 5 research performance model. So this is the descriptive data. We can see from the funding size of 2004, only 400,000 is the minimum supported by the government. And the maximum is 22 billion, which is big. However, until 2015, the minimum supported by the government reached to 1 million. And then the maximum is 25 billion. So it's a very a great growth from this 10 years, within these 10 years. And also we can see the number of the undergraduate student and the postgraduate student is also growing. And this is the regression model according to different analyzed model from baseline, formula, historical, and educational performance and research performance. With the use the log transfer variable, because we use the dummy or to shrink the size of the sampling, and we use the log transfer variable here. You may see from the bottom of this diagram, the R square of baseline model 1, is 0.529, which is a very big explanation power. And then goes to model 2. We have explanation is not that much, and then goes to model 5, model 3. The newly added variable is 70%. And then it goes to model 4, we have 3% of the explanations. Then goes to model 5, is not much explanations according to the growth of the delta R squares. So I'm going to give you a full explanation according to the diagram previously. So about the public university, all shows their significant difference received from the government compared to the private universities. And also the mission of the universities, particularly for research-oriented universities, receive more than the other universities in terms of model 1 and model 2. And about model 3 to model 5, it shows no significance to the mission of universities. And number of the students per faculty numbers, they all shows a very significant effect from model 1 to model 5. And also the log number of the graduate students also showed a very significant effect right here. The funding size of 2004 only show their significance from model 3 to model 5. So the size of funding in 2004 a very significant positive effect. So if the amount of funding increased by 1% in 2004, that means in 2015 increased by 0.46%. And interestingly, about employment rate, only show the significant effect in model 4 and model 5. They don't show any significance from model 1 to model 3. I'm going to explain more later on. So about the publication, domestic and international article papers, so all shows no significance effect, which means the funding size and the investment from the government doesn't see any significant effect in terms of their publication. So this is the first phase according to the independent variable 2004's investment to see the performance of 2015. And this is another phase, phase 2, 2019, which is ruled by DPP. Also, we can see the minimum investment funding from the government in 2019 is 1 million. And then the maximum investment is 8 billion, a little bit fewer compared to 2015. And also we can see the R square right here is pretty much the same as the phase 1, but we need to pay more about the differences, the model 3 and model 2. In model 2 here, they can expand like 22% when we newly added the new variable, like a number of the students under the rule of DPP party. And not much significance, not much explanation power in terms of the model 3. We only can see only at 2% when at the funding size of 2004. So here we can see further explanations. Also, we can see public university receive more from the private university and also show their significance. And about the mission of the universities, from model 2 to model 5, tell us there's no significant from these models, only show significance from model 1 and receive 1.05% compared to the other universities. And about locations, only model 2 doesn't see any significance. Compared to the number 2, the other of that only show there very little significance in terms of the location. And also the students, we can see here with the newly added values from model 2 to model 5, the number of undergraduate and graduate students all shows a very significant effect. And in terms of funding size of 2004, from model 3 to model 5, it shows a very significant positive effect. And also it's very interesting here, employment rate. The model 4 and model 5, there has no significant effort. And also pretty much the same thing in academic performance, domestic and international article papers. I'm going to explain more later on here. So I'm going to compare these two different phases with this diagram. So in terms of the public or private universities, in private universities, they both shows a very significant effort and receive more funding compared to private universities. In terms of missions, both phases shows a very significant effect. Research-oriented university receive more than the other universities. And in terms of model 2, the phase 1 shows a significant effect, and the phase 2 has no significant effect. And in terms of location, the phase 1 has no significant effect. And the phase 2, they have very slight significant effect compared to phase 1. And student, the phase 1, the student number of undergraduate has no significance. The phase 2, the number of undergraduate students, they show a very significant effect. And the number of graduate students, both of phases all show a very significant effect. In terms of the log funding size of 2004, the size of funding in 2004 a very significant positive effect. In phase 1, the amount of funding increased by 1% in 2004, and in 2015 increased by 0.46%. In phase 2, if the amount funding increased by 1%, and in 2019 increased by 0.115%. Employment rate, phase 1 shows a significant effect, while phase 2, they didn't show any significant effect in terms of employment rate. In both phase 1 and phase 2, they don't show any significance in terms of the publication. So I'm going to make some conclusion according to the introduction that I just gave you. So I'm going to argue that producing academic papers, we will say is more from like individual level and self-commitment, because we can see the funding, the investment from the government didn't show any significance from these two phases. So we think maybe individual commitment is more important than the government fundings right here in terms of the academic performance. And the second one, the ruling party's ideological preference does reflect on the types of funding allocation. As I mentioned, KMT is more elite oriented. So they only invest few universities, not like a DPP, more left-wing oriented. So they would like to take care to cover all of the universities. So their ideological preference probably will reflect on the types of funding allocation. So also we have different explanation according to our findings. KMT explain more on historical funding size. So the phase one, the explanation power is 70% compared to 2%. And the DPP explain more on the formula model, and the explanation power is 20% compared to 6%. So the fourth one does funding work on educational performance and academic performance. As I said, probably the party ideological preference will reflect the result of their preference. But our argue is that educational performance, particularly like employment rate, I think the KMT works more compared to DPP. And also, we will argue the last point is Matthew effect. I think our coordinator, Professor Shin, he's a very decent Christian. The Matthew effect means that those who receive more fundings probably will grow bigger. And is it good or right for our policy making? I don't know, but we do see some effect according to Matthew principle. And also the other principle, distributive justice, adopted by DPP. So it is an option for our policymakers. Should we go back to like elite oriented and make more, make our educational performance better than the other educational performance ruled by DPP. So this is the argument that or debate we are undergoing now. So that will be my presentation for this session. Thank you for your listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. And then if you have any question, please reserve it. And after the second presentation, please ask your question. And Dr. Lee, are you ready to put on the screen? Okay.
Okay, I'm ready. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, my name is Jin-Kwon Lee, and I'm going to present the Korean case. And as Professor Shin already explained, South Korea adopted competition-based funding after 1995, but it is questionable whether competition-based funding is really based on universities' performance. So there were some studies that institutions' size or the experience of receiving funding in the past affect current funding size. So this research focused on figure out what factors affect institutional funding size in South Korea. So there are various ways of funding to institutions. So this table shows how we could classify competition-based funding in various funding systems. So competition-based funding is one kind of performance-based funding. So this method should have closer relationships with institutions' performance. And this figure briefly represents the changing scheme of governmental funding in South Korea. So before 1994, Korea had to create higher education conditions. So the basic funding system was equal support. But after 1994, evaluation-based differential support has introduced and started to expand. And from 2004, the fundamental principle was changed to choice and concentration. Therefore, competition-based funding expanded broadly. And in 2008, formula funding was introduced, but still a lot of fundings were based on competition-based funding. And after 2014, as the evaluation scheme getting more power, financial support was strongly linked with university evaluation. And this figure represents the estimated share of competition-based funding in South Korea from 1991. As you can see, in 2004, as the choice and concentration principle has applied, the amount of competition-based funding increased to 29% from 12% in 2003. And after 2004, its portion growing steadily, and as a result, the ratio reached 41% in 2018. So based on these policy contexts, we made an analytical framework, and this formula represents the empirical model of our research. And using the hierarchical method, we estimated this model from the baseline model and to research performance model. Here are the definitions of variables, but this part was already explained by Professor Robin and Professor Shin, so I'll skip this slide. And this table shows descriptive statistics of our data, so South Korean data. So there is a public universities were 23%, and almost 39% of universities were located in metropolitan. Okay, these are scatter plots between independent and dependent variables. The vertical axis means log funding size of 2017, and the horizontal axis is independent variables. So both figures show close correlations between university size and funding size. As the undergraduate students grow, the funding size of 2017 increases as well. And the left figure shows correlations between the educational performance, employment rate, and funding. And although it's not strong, but we can find some tendency of positive correlation. Maybe this is some controversial. And the right figure represents the correlation between the funding size of 2003, which means the historical factor, and the present funding size. We can find a strong correlation between the two variables. And the following figure shows correlations between research performance and funding size. And there was a weak correlation with domestic articles. Maybe this is because large and high performance universities tend to focus on more international articles than domestic articles. So with international articles, there was a strong correlation between the two variables. Okay, here are the regression results. For the baseline model, we included basic characteristics of universities, and the R-squared was 0.494. And for the next step, we included the number of students as proxy variables of the size of universities. So R squared is 0.848, and our delta R squared is 0.354, which means the increased statistical power of explanation compared to the former step is very significant. And in the next model, historical model, delta R squared is 0.001, which is very small, and it was not significant. And for the education performance model, the employment rate variables was included, and delta R squared was 0.012. And finally, for the research performance model, we included the number of articles published in domestic and international academic journals per professor. So delta R squared of model 5 was 0.014. So let me briefly interpret this model. So public universities received 3.6% more financial support than private universities. And universities located in metropolitan areas or metropolitan cities, they received less funding than non-metropolitan universities. And the number of undergraduate students, which means university size, affected funding size very significantly. But the number of graduate students, this variable is not significant. And as a historical factor, the coefficient of log funding size of 2003 is significant. And both educational and research performance variables have significant effects on the funding size of 2017. So we can conclude that the largest share of funding depends on institutions' size. Budget history affects present funding size, but it's not a much influential factor in funding allocation in Korean model. And also we observed that institutional performance is getting considered. It is estimated that about 2.6% of total funding is allocated by institutional performance. So this means that although the Korean government has adopted competition-based funding and announcing almost 40% of government funding is allocated by the performance of institutions officially, but its actual percentage is way lesser than that. So our research finding implies that although competition-based funding is widely applied in South Korea, but still institutional size is critical for funding allocation decisions. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. And now we know the result, whether the government allocate funding according to the institutional performance or not. In Taiwan case, in the year of 2015, it was about 4% in 2015. In South Korea, it is about 2.6% only in 2018. That means although each individual university work hard to receive more funding from the government, but it is not working. Actually, government allocated funding by their own ways. So we know which university is winner, which university are loser. Okay, that's our major findings. But in Taiwan case, after the new government, the performance logic was not working. So that the current government has a clear policy direction and it is working in practice. In South Korea, it's different story. Okay, we have two presentation about the funding mechanism and its real impact on the institutional funding allocation in South Korea and in Taiwan. Do you have any question, please?
Maybe let me get the ball rolling.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation, and it actually it unpick a lot of assumption that people have about performance-based funding that is actually also in the policy discourse in Malaysia and in some of the other higher education systems around. So my question is really on the model. What is the rationale of having a hierarchical model at model 4 and 5? And why does is there a theoretical reason behind in terms of factoring the employment rate before looking at the research performance?
Okay.
Because it got to do with perhaps with my context, because in my context, majority of the performance funding is related to research rather than with on institutional development or programs. So would that have a different implication if a different model is to, let's say your model 4 will put in the research performance, and then model 5 add on to the employment rate? Would that be a different effect? And that also relates to the second question, is there a sort of, will we be able to know what exactly is the proportion of performance funding in both systems in terms of allocation for research, for student programs, or for any other purposes?
Okay, that's a good question. Great.
Thank you.
Actually, there's a lot of discussion about how to measure institutional performance. And we have two categories of performance. One is education performance, the other one is research performance, because of the major function of the university, right? And for education performance, we have a bunch of key performance indicators. Among them, the neoliberalism emphasize the employability and market relevant education, so that employment rate of the college grade, that's a key indicators in South Korea, and also I'm sure in Taiwan too. So that it is one key indicator for measuring education performance or human resource development performance. And the second one is, as well known, is research productivity. How can we measure research productivity or research performance? One is article publication and the other one is book publication. But book market is a little bit different from article market, so that we picked only journal articles in domestic journals and international journals. Both are significant in both countries, right? Before the 2015 in Taiwan and after 2018 in 2018 in Korea. So that there's a lot of discussions and debate about the key performance indicators, whether it's exact measure or no, and how to exactly capture the productivity or performance of the higher education institution, or its ongoing issues. We know the limitation.
Well, I mean, my question is not really about what is the measure. Is it whether does the proportion of the different kind of funding for different activities of the university, would it have a larger implication on the effect of the performance? Because in the case of Taiwan, I think the publication productivity is not significant. But where else the employment one seems to be significant. And I was wondering if for example, majority of the performance funding is given to research, will the research effect will have a stronger effect as compared to if you add it together with the employment effect. So I mean, that's just perhaps a food for thought to
yeah, good.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Actually, there's different types of funding items, like one specific funding item focusing on research, the other one focusing on teaching, so that if we sort out which one belong to which category. But in some funding case, policy design, it has both teaching and research together, so that it's not easy to differentiate between which one is for specifically for teaching or which one is for research? Yeah, that's good question, and this policy practice. But in our research, we try to simplify what we can tell from our own data. So data availability is another issue. Thank you, Sidi.
Thank you.
Should we move to next one? Because we have another third panel session, second panel. Okay. Here we. Okay, here we have Futao. Futao, would you say hello to everybody? Professor Wang?
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Welcome to.
I'm sorry for being late because I tried to get the room, but I failed doing for several times.
No worries.
So when
you're here right time. You're on time now. Okay. Let me briefly introduce our second panel session under this special session 2. Let me share the screen with you. Okay. We have we are a growing number of the international faculty members in East Asia, in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and also Hong Kong is a huge market for international faculty members. So that we will talk about how international faculty members culturally adjust themselves within new social and academic environment in 4 higher education systems. We have 4 panelists, Professor Futao from Hiroshima University. Would you say hello? Okay, thank you. And Professor Sophia Shi-Huei from University of Taipei. Thank you. And Professor Li-fang Zhang from University of Hong Kong. Hello. And Dr. Heejin Lim from Seoul National University. Hello. Thank you very much. I'm going to moderate this session. Okay. Full screen, please. Yeah. Okay. It is extremely difficult to adjust ourselves to new socio-cultural environment. It's same to international faculty members. So our question is whether their socio-cultural adjustment is related to their different between Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong in different socio-economic contexts, because Hong Kong is basically English-speaking system, right? So the international faculty members feel a little bit comfortable to adjust themselves in the new environment. But in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, we are in different contexts. So that we're going to talk about this issue, how the international faculty members adjust themselves in different academic and social context. Here you can see there's some number of or share of the international faculty members in 4 systems. In Japan, it's about 4.6% of the total faculty members. In Korea, 5.6%. Taiwan, 2.2%. Hong Kong, 58.6%. But if we exclude the international faculty members from the mainland China side, then the share will be a little bit reduced, right? I guess. Okay, and then why we recruit international faculty members? In the beginning, it was for delivering lecture in English in Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. English lecture delivery was basic goals. And then sometimes we can think about incorporating global perspective from the international faculty members. But in recent days, global rankings, world-class university, these are core factors why we hire international faculty members, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. And then in the future, we may talk about how can we make open and flexible academic system and academic culture within Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. That will be our goal in the long future. But it's not easy to accomplish this one because three societies are very homogeneous society, so that it is difficult to incorporate different cultural aspects in our own social and academic systems. Here, I can compare the two different systems. In the Anglo-American countries, they are mainly recruiting international faculty members in the field of the science and engineering areas. That means they are emphasizing research functions. But in other systems like East Asian system, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, we are exporter of the engineers and scientists to the Anglo-American countries. But we import the social scientists and humanities scholars. That's the main difference between two. One is science and engineering focused system. The other one is social science and humanity focused system. So you can see that some difference. In social science and humanity, we are more emphasizing teaching function. But in engineering, science field, they are emphasizing much more research focused one. So that one professor from Taiwan, if he or she is hired by Anglo-American system, probably their major area is science and engineering. Their main role is research instead of teaching. But in here, we are different. Okay, in our collaborative research project, our main research question is like international faculty members' cultural adjustment differ by their original country, whether they are from Anglo-American countries or from East Asian countries, and by their academic disciplines like social science and humanities or engineering and science areas. Okay, further, whether this kind of cultural adjustment is related to their intention to departure from these four higher education systems. Okay. Then we collect the data from in October 2020 through April 2021, and we interviewed approximately 60 through 9 minutes from with the international faculty members. Our sample size from Japan, we have 6 comprehensive universities, 3 comprehensive universities from Korea, 5 comprehensive universities from Taiwan, and Hong Kong, 1 comprehensive university. We have also 2 science and technology focused universities, 1 in Korea, the other one in Taiwan. And our sample size is totally, in terms of institution, we have 17 institutions, 17 universities, and we have totally 36 interviewees from 4 higher education systems. According to their original nationalities, some Asian citizens, some has ASEAN citizenship, like certain people has ASEAN citizenship, 12 from European citizenship, and 11 from Anglo-American citizenship, which means that in terms of regional orientation, they are relatively equally distributed in Asia, Europe, and Anglo-American system. Our next section is about the findings. So I would like to invite our 4 presenters to discuss about their findings from their own interview analysis. The first question is about the motivation to pursue an academic career in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. I would like to invite Futao first. Futao, would you like to start? What was their main motivation to develop their own academic career in Japan?
Thank you very much, Jesse, and thank you for organizing the session and also make a strong leadership of organizing the project. And can I share some of my slides?
Oh yeah, of course. Just
I will not take much time. And I can't find my.
Okay, take your time. Futao, do you mind if I invite Korea first and then you follow her? While you-
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead, please. Please.
Thank you. Dr. Lim, are you ready?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the first theme of our interview was about the motivation for international faculty members to pursue academic career in Korea. And one of the big factor was about the poor job market conditions in their home country. So they could not find a suitable job positions. So they had to inevitably seek for opportunities outside their country. Second motivation was seeking for opportunity for career advancement. Those international faculty who already had faculty job in their home country or elsewhere, but they wanted to find tenure track position, or they wanted to work in institution with higher reputation. So that was one of the reasons why they came to Korea in research universities. And also, some of them were invited directly from Korean University to establish a new institution or program. And also, few of the interviewee had their prior work experience in Korean University as a postdoc. And quite a lot of them were married to Korean spouse. So it was quite a natural choice for them to seek for a job position in Korea. So that was the motivations for Korean case. Should I carry on with the next topic, or Professor Huang will?
Okay, thank you. Professor Huang, are you ready? Please
Yeah.
down your
Sorry,
short.
I tried again.
Sure, please. Take your time.
I'm sorry. And then, can you see my
Yes,
slide?
thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. And I think it's important for me to make a very brief introduction to the main characteristics of all 10 participants can find. I have selected, all the 10 research-intensive universities, and 5 of them belong to the former imperial universities, and 2 of them are newly funded, even used to comprehensive, but now they are all research-intensive universities, and also one of the leading research-intensive private universities. And you can find information on nationality and academic title, and also gender. So in terms of the first question and motivation, the answers, I have made a very brief summary of the main findings from the semi-structured interviews with 9 of the participants. Can find 5, more than half, 5 participants were motivated by academic factors to come and work in Japan. And you can find 2 examples. For example, B, and he's a professor who is from engineering and been working in Japan for nearly 30 years. I want to learn more about Japanese approach to environmental sustainability, and so I came to Japan. And he's from the UK. And the second one is I was indeed quite motivated to pursue academics at Japan University. So most of them are driven to come to work in Japan by research or professional motivation. But you can also find there are some other various factors driven them to work in Japan. For example, there are 4 different factors. One of them said, I like the culture and everyday life here. Second, I'm looking for a new experience. It's nothing with either academic or professional reason. Third is because, as Chris just mentioned, it's because of my personal reason, because I met my current wife in Japan. My wife is Japanese, so it's one of the reasons why I stay here. And the final and participant said, I cannot find an academic position in China, although she was graduated from a very famous university in Japan. So these are main findings focusing on the motivations from my surveys. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Sophia, are you ready? Okay, we cannot hear you. Please turn on microphone, please. Microphone.
This is the 7 people I have been interviewed. So you can find out there are 2 from Asia and 2 from European and also 2 American people. And about the first part is the motivation to pursue the academic career in Taiwan. I think one of the reasons is for kids, because they like the education environment in Taiwan. No cram school. I bet he doesn't understand Taiwan. We still have a cram school, and also I think the living condition is quite suitable for his family, and also especially he died to live in the southern Taiwan because the weather and also the food. And the other one, and the same as Korean and also Japanese, the job market in their country is very tight, especially for the Asia academic members. And the other one is like a Chinese culture and history. And I asked them, and also they stayed in the mainland China more than 5 or 7 years. And I asked them why they don't want to stay there. So they mentioned about the university estimate field. They say the collegiality in decision-making process like that, and also the academic autonomy and also the campus freedom. So that's why they prefer to stay in Taiwan. And the other one, they also mentioned about good hygiene and public security and friendly and willing to help. So it's kind of like the cultural issues that they select Taiwan. And it's very interesting. In my interview, 2 of them, one from American and the other from the Vietnam, they studied their doctor program, also the postdoc training here. So that's why they prefer to stay here. So this is the first part. It's about motivation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Li-fang.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Chen, for your strong leadership in leading this project, and thank you for making me part of this, or more broadly, Hong Kong. Since you have talked about the demographics, so I'm going to skip that. But I do want to summarize by saying that we have 5 colleagues from European countries and the United States, and another 5 from Asia. We actually have 2 from Japan, 1 from Vietnam, 1 from Singapore, and the other one from South Korea. In terms of their initial motivation for coming to Hong Kong to pursue their academic career, there are a number of reasons, as all of you have presented as well. Some overlap with yours, others are unique to Hong Kong. First, in terms of their initial motivation, advice from former supervisor, colleague in the same field, or a friend motivated several of our participants. And also, there are some personal reasons, such as a spouse being from Hong Kong or places nearby, as well as Hong Kong being close to their home country. Say, for example, of course, those 5 from Asian countries. Well, the participant did commented that the application, the hiring process at Hong Kong, actually all of 10 people or our interviewees are from one university, which is my university, the University of Hong Kong, also for short HKU. Their interview process being smooth, and some did mention that they had difficulty finding desirable jobs in the United States, Europe, Singapore, or South Korea. So those are the particular countries or jurisdictions that were mentioned. A couple participants recalled that their interview experiences with universities from the mainland China and Taiwan as being a culture shock, which along with language issues deterred their interest in working with those, in those places. Some also cited not knowing the local language as an important reason for having not applied to other East Asian countries. So the fact that English is the medium instruction and that is widely used in daily life in Hong Kong is important to our participants. Well, in addition, it should be mentioned that although except one participant whose wife is a Hong Kong local and another participant who is a descendant of a former expatriate official in Hong Kong, most participants had very limited experience with Hong Kong before they came to the city for their academic jobs. Despite that, the University of Hong Kong, or more generally Hong Kong, were attractive to our participants for another 4 reasons. Well, the first one is probably not surprising to any one of you, is a financial one. Most of our participants moved to Hong Kong at their early stages in their career. Actually, our participants, which I didn't mention, their length of service ranged from 2 to 18 years. So those who came earlier stayed on. Or they considered the job packages offered by Hong Kong U as highly attractive, and indeed, high salaries and startup funds were generally mentioned as the determinant reason for choosing to move to Hong Kong. A second reason might be a bit surprising given the atmosphere still is the academic freedom that they enjoy in Hong Kong, especially the universities. And the third reason is the fact that HKU has been rated favorably in various university worldwide ranking systems. Is also mentioned as one of the key motivating factor. And finally, Hong Kong being a global city with a considerable international population, as shown actually by Professor Shin's just university, in different part of the rest of the society, different walks of life, that is the same here. So I guess that is the general motivation.
Thank you, Professor Zhang. And okay, there's a lot of motivation factors that brought the international faculty members in East Asia. In Hong Kong case, it's very interesting because you pay high salary, so it is very attractive place for many international faculty members. But then in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, we may not provide a good salary package for them.
Yeah, I think language is a big issue. The fact that they just can get around. Later on, you will hear about the adjustment. Basically, there's not much to adjust to. So
yes,
language is the key.
Thank you, thank you. And second topic is about the general living and interaction adjustment. In Hong Kong case, adjustment is much easier for many international faculty members, but in Korea, Japan, Taiwan, it is extremely difficult because our language is different. Our way of thinking is not much open-minded. So that, or Dr. Lee, would you like to start first?
Jesse.
Okay, so
should I take lead or anyone else? I'm not sure. Sorry, I just want to check.
Okay, the question from floor.
Should I present first or Professor?
Oh, okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, so okay, about the general living and interaction adjustment. Quite a lot of interviews were generally very satisfied with their life in Korea. But there were certain challenges emerged in typically about the huge difficulty adjusting to the somewhat very strange housing rental system in Korea. In Korea, we have very unique rental system where they request huge amount of deposit, like $500,000 to minimize the burden of monthly rent. But for international faculty members, it is very difficult for them to save such a huge amount of money in a short period of time. They cannot get enough loans from the bank because of their foreign nationality. So they were not very happy with the house they were living in because they cannot afford to find a suitable place. Second difficulty was about children's education issues for those who had children because of the very competitive education culture in Korea. And if they want to send their child to international school, the cost is very high and it's not enough to cover with their salary. So they had the dilemma whether they should stay or leave to somewhere else for the children's education issues. And also, some people complained about worsening air quality situation in Korea. And lastly, most of them had no actual social life outside university. So they didn't feel inclusion from the Korean society in general. The reason for such lack of social life was basically because of their limited Korean language proficiency. So none of them were fluent in Korean. So it was just enough to survive their daily life chores. So those were the general living and interaction adjustment difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And Professor Huang, are you ready? Thank you.
Okay, and I think that we talk the second topic. It's about and faculty life and adjustment, focusing on work adjustment.
Okay,
so based on my
we have another one. Second one is about general living and interaction adjustment.
Okay.
It's a third one actually. So yes.
This one?
Yes, that one. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm sorry. And the based on my interviews with 9 participants and 7 you can find, and majority of them, 7 participants emphasized they enjoy living in Japan, and there are no any interaction adjustment problems. For example, one of them mentioned it. I'm satisfied with my life in Japan. Many of the things that I enjoy doing in Japan were easier than in the UK. And almost all of them expressed similar observations. And Japan is a nice country and it's very convenient, very safe. And living in Tokyo, or, for example, Osaka or Kyoto, and it's very international. So you don't have to worry about your personal safety or anything else. These are I'm missing the common points that I mentioned. Still, two of them observed that not everything is perfect. For example, one of them mentioned because his campus is not located in big city, and imagine that I think most of life here are good, peaceful, and environment is also good, but sometimes there will be a little bit boring compared with my home country because he comes from a big city in China. So I think there are both positive and negative sides, good things and bad things. It cannot be 100% perfect. So my conclusion is that majority of them showed a very high satisfaction with living in Japan. And also it seems that very few, just one of them mentioned it, there seems there's no social interaction with local people. This is the main findings from my interviews. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Wang. And Professor Ho, are you ready? Oh, please turn on microphone, please. Oh, we cannot hear you. Please turn on microphone.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, about the general living and the interaction adjustment in Taiwan, well, they all recognize the language proficiency is very important, but they mentioned 2 parts. I think that will be interesting about that, especially for the professor, they stayed in the southern Taiwan. They asked for the speak, not just the Mandarin, but also the local language like a Hakka, because there are so many the different communities stay there, and if they want to go shopping, and that's not a Mandarin issue, that's the Hakka language issue. And also for the humanity and also the science, social science faculty, they do believe the learning language is very important for them. But for the faculties from the engineering or also the science, they think that their time want to spend in doing the research rather than to learning the language, because they say that their family, their wives or daughters or the kids can help them to handle everything. So the language, I think there will be a two sides for. And like Professor Futao said, the European professor, they prefer their social life. So they are outgoing. Even the university doesn't offer any activity. They just to expand their social network, and they just the weekend they go out and riding the bicycle, everything. They kind of enjoying themselves. But for the Asia people, they would like to stay home. So that's a very interesting to find out. And the other one, for instance, the local language, want to communicate with local people. But for if you are also teach in the Southern University, they want to know more about the local culture, because some immigrants from the Southeast Asia countries, they stay in the Southern Taiwan. So not just the language, but also the culture. I think that would be make some suggestion for the Southern University. And also the Asia, we find out 2 Asia professors, they tended to interact with the friends, colleagues, or even students from their own countries rather than the other ones. It's not a safety issue, that's because they are just coming from the same country and they think they are more familiar with, so they are afraid to make some mistakes. So that's why could have a more easy for them to communicate. The last one is also important too, I think interesting too. I say unless those faculty members live in the school dormitory, otherwise they don't have any opportunity to interact with the Taiwanese colleague after school. But maybe for the first 2 years they will stay in the dormitory, but later on they try to move out because they need more space. So if I ask him whether they have some communication, I mean, either the weekend or the after school, it's a 0. So that's how I find. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Rachel also mentioned the same things in South Korean universities. The international faculty members, their social life only stay on campus. Without out of the campus, there's no serious social life there. So that they are big trouble in terms of the social life. I think it's same in Japanese case. As Professor Huang mentioned about it, it is not easy to enjoy their life during the weekend in small city, small town. Okay. Okay. Let's move on. Let us move on to the third topic, which is about academic adjustment.
Li-fang?
Oh, Li-fang. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Please.
Right. I'll be quick. I know we're under time constraint. So as you can imagine, all of our participants expressed general satisfaction living in Hong Kong, although the majority of them did mention the high cost for accommodation. They did not consider it as a difficulty because they also earn enough or a lot to pay for their rent. Actually, everybody has accommodation subsidy. So obviously being able to get around easily by speaking English was definitely viewed as a big plus of Hong Kong. And in terms of socialization, the American and European participants found a closer attachment with the expatriate community in the city, while the participants from Asia made more remarks about how wonderful and big variety of food that we have in Hong Kong. And of the 10 participants, we have 6 that do have families here. So all of the 6 participants with families in Hong Kong reported great satisfaction for their spouses. Finding a job in Hong Kong was not hard, so that both of them could pursue their careers here in Hong Kong. For their children, Hong Kong was regarded as a good place to receive education because of its cultural diversity. Even in the public system, there are local schools using English as the medium of instruction. So our participants were really happy that their kids were learning multiple languages and making friends with children from diverse backgrounds, and they did regard this as a very good educational experience. In terms of interactions, our participants mentioned that they usually interact either with colleagues from work or both colleagues from work and people from the expat community. Particularly, there are some social interest groups such as dancing clubs and sports team and so forth. So overall, their interaction with the local Cantonese people was very limited due to the lack of language efficiency or lack of language knowledge at all. So except those who didn't like socialization, our participants really enjoyed the lively social life here in Hong Kong, at least before the social unrest in 2019, and then of course more recently, or the past 18 months of the pandemic. Despite their general satisfaction with the general living conditions, some participants did express a number of difficulties. For example, several of them mentioned that not knowing the local language could cause communication challenges, problems in some contexts. Say, for example, if you go to a wet market, or farmer's market, or small stores, there's no problem if you go to high-end shops, obviously. And some also remarked that the local bureaucratic systems, for example, banks, and the unfriendliness among local service people can be truly annoying. So I guess nothing big, still some small problems. So I think that's all from me.
Thank you very much. As far as the general adjustment, we have academics, we have serious challenges for academic career adjustment on universities. So that our next question is about the faculty life adjustment, work-related adjustment on campus. So surely from the reverse way, like as an apology to missing Li-fang in the previous topic, do you mind if I invite Li-fang first for the third question, academic adjustment? Would you start, Professor Zhang?
You want me to go first on this?
Yes, that's my apology.
Thank you so much. Okay, so well, when being asked about questions in terms of university life, of course, those 4 pillars, we also have, or rather 3 pillars, teaching, research, and administration or services at Hong Kong U. All of our participants are truly pleased with what we have been doing. Regarding teaching, most of them consider their teaching light as actually reasonable or much too lighter than, say, for example, that in the American universities, or most of the American universities. And several also expressed their appreciation of the fact that they could teach what they liked and what they happened to research on. And in terms of their research, all participants appreciate the academic freedom. Some of you might be having some doubt in your mind given the current situation, but they still very much appreciate the academic freedom. They enjoy the Hong Kong U, as well as the abundant research funding that they could obtain in Hong Kong. Nevertheless, several participants did mention the pressure that they face or were facing before they get tenure. Mainly because the standard for tenure just keep on rising, and a lot of times it is really not clear. So as for service and administration workload, our participants consider it light in general, except for a couple of participants who are more senior. Actually, we had 2 department heads within our interview sample, and several participants particularly appreciate this in term compare with, sorry, Futao, that they did compare Hong Kong U and universities in Japan. So we have a couple of participants compare that. We also asked in terms of their mentorship. In terms of that, most of our participants had formally assigned or designated mentors when they start their jobs at Hong Kong U, whom they commented as being very helpful, especially in terms of offering information about tenure review requirements. Of course, there's only so much colleagues can do. Still, they are not clear. As well as advice in terms of socially integrating into the departments. However, mentors were not the only ones who offered help. Those participants without formal or being assigned with formal mentors did receive help and advice from other colleagues. So really no participant has recorded any difficulty in terms of adjusting into their university life here in Hong Kong. And we did ask them in terms of their research collaboration. As you can probably imagine, those who came here just more recently, say for example, 2 to 5 years or 7 years, they are still working with their colleagues from their old institutions in their home country or from the country from which they became. And finally, when we asked about their participation in professional affiliation in Hong Kong, only a few were involved in Hong Kong local associations, despite the fact that all of them are involved in international academic organizations. I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Chen.
Thank you, Professor. And then I would invite Professor Huang for Taiwan.
Okay, I remember to turn on my microphone. Okay, here. All right, about the faculty life justice, including their working justice, I would say there's a lot of complaint here, so I'll just say something true. But for the European and also the American faculty members, they feel that the Taiwanese, the administrative system is a serious bureaucracy. And also they think about it's really have a cumbersome administration process because they ask for help or maybe they give some suggestion for improvement, but sometimes they just without any follow-up. So they kind of just shut up and say nothing because I think that's useless. And also they think the Taiwanese college emphasize the academic ranking. You are the professor, associate professor, or assistant professor, and also care about the position title. Sometimes they call the family name, the first name. They were shocked. You say, well, how can you call me that? You have to call me professor, blah blah blah, and also their authority. So that's how they when they in the department, and also they say something about. They think that the Taiwanese college too much emphasis on the quality of the article published rather than the quality of the research. So it think that's no good for that. That's those are from the European, also the American faculty member say that. And also they say the Taiwan professors are very proud of being a faculty member in the research university. So they will say, I'm coming from, Taiwan University, Tsinghua University. And then they will say, so what? it really doesn't matter because they have their own self-proud. They proud themselves rather than, laboring under the institution reputation. And also for the European, especially for the science professor, they say they should be invited to attending to the department meeting or the college level meeting. And but they say, oh, it doesn't matter because those meetings are conducted in Chinese, or even for the document are written in Chinese. I cannot say anything or to read anything. And another one is for those international faculties, they were invited to do some administration work, especially as serving as a consultant to the international office. The purpose is to help those in that university to promote some internationalization or even to recruit a foreign student. And the other one is when they are doing something, they feel that the horizontal communication between the administration and also the academic unions is not so smooth. So they have to spend much time to talk to them and they feel they are very self-centered. They're very, you know, especially for the department or the dean, I mean, for the administration level. And all of the participants I interviewed, they are hired by contract, but one of them are going to become the tenure because he's done a wonderful job, and he is the first one getting the International Faculty Award from most. So they will be hired by Taiwan University for, you know, it's kind of like a tenure track. But for the assistant professor, they are under a lot of pressure because they have to match the research quality. And also they do, all of the university, they do offer the welcome orientation for those those professors. They are very happy about that. But for the marriage foreign faculty, they say they need some help from setting the family and also the kids' education. But that part are not offering by the university. That's how the last one. And the other one is, this one. I think this is a very interesting about one. They say that the friendly campus environment and also the bilingual side of the university are still sufficient. They're talking about the document and also, you know, that some paperwork is still written or in Chinese, so they don't understand that. So they have to using the Google app to try to translate it, or have the research assistant to help in that. And they think we are very conservative, you know, very hierarchy. And we respect our teachers, and you know, it's like a follow the traditional Chinese culture. So everything is respect, respect, respect. But for the European professor, probably are not very you know, they get used to that. And then they say that for the Chinese, the Taiwanese, even for the Asia faculty, they call it Asia faculty. They don't like being criticized to their papers or even to share their research finding. So they give me the one word, say, it seems like you are so afraid of your research idea or results being paralyzed. You know? Oh yeah, right. And the other one is, for the Asia faculty, they care about teaching. But for the European and also the American faculties, they continue reading, writing, learning, and also the publishing. So it can make sense why they are teaching track, and the other one is the research track. The professors has been divided through the international faculty in Taiwan. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, so the faculty life adjustment can be categorized into 3 areas, which are teaching, research, service. As for teaching, the biggest challenges interviewees face was to adjust towards different teaching and learning culture in Korea. Students are not very active in classrooms, and they are very sensitive towards their grade and also very competitive. So international faculty members had to change their teaching style in order to adapt to such differences. About research, there were certain differences based on the discipline background. For soft discipline, there were difficulties about adjusting to how Korean universities heavily emphasize on journal publication performance. Also for hard discipline, difficulties arise about the securing resources like recruiting highly skilled students and to get funding to expand their labs. Also, especially engineering international faculty members reported a lack of collaboration opportunity with the industry because Korean industry does not like to work with international faculty because of the language issue. As for service, there were common issues regarding minimal participation and exclusion from decision-making process and departmental governance. However, one of the most interesting findings on the Korean case was how international faculty perceive such exclusion. Some of them actually enjoy being excluded because being excluded means less work. But at the same time, some of them were very resentful about not having enough opportunity because it limits their professional development and their visibility as a faculty member in their institution. And there were some other issues. Many international faculty members perceive being in Korea as being far away from the center of the in the global academia. So they felt there are a lack of intellectual stimulation because there aren't much discussions with Korean colleagues. They don't really share much about their research. So feeling, isolated from the center was one of important issue for international faculty. So that's it for the Korean case.
Okay, thank you very much. And Professor Wang.
Yes, and
yes, that is.
This is about the faculty life and adjustment. Several times I just pick up some key points, which I think should be important. And you can find it more than half. 6 participants expressed very high satisfaction with their teaching, research, and other academic and administrative activities. Just cite one of participants' observations below. I think it could provide a very typical example of international faculty who is working in a leading university in Japan, and how he perceives of his academic work. He said, I'm satisfied. I have intensive roles in all these categories, like teaching, research, and administration, and the other social service, because he has been then invited many times to give to interpret what is happening, and in terms of, for example, earth science in Japan's television, and he could speak both English. He comes from the UK. He could speak both English and Japanese. And he said, and I probably have slightly less time that I can devote my research activity than I would like. He's very busy. I do have a large teaching load and large administrative roles because he's also a member of an important institution committee in his university as well. That is true. So I would like to rebalance it. His problem is how to rebalance all these different activities. But I do not feel like unhappy or very dissatisfied with it. If in an ideal case, I would rebalance it. I think this how to rebalance a different, a variety of academics and administrative activities. And he's senior professor. And in the case of a young, newly hired international faculty, and he said, I'm extremely satisfied with my teaching and research activities as assistant professor. Here so far, I followed general principles. This is typical because he comes from the United States. 40 refers to 40 time budget for teaching, 40% of his time and allocated for research, and 20% of his time budget for the other, for social services and administrative activities for those duties. But still, there are 2 of them seem to be not well justified to their work. For example, one of them mentioned, I think system here is good. Like we have freedom to pursue our own research, and we have many times, 3 times to devote our interest. That's a good thing. But like we because he's very young and he was a newly hired staff, we cannot supervise student and have our own labor. And he comes from the United States, and he mentions that in my country, even you are assistant professor, but if you're excellent, and you can also supervise doctor students. I think this is one of the issues facing the participants. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Futao. According to my own observation of your presentation, I think that the international faculty members are much more challenged in terms of their academic life rather than their social life. Because of the conservative academic system, and then administrative system is not much supportive, and we do not have any mentoring program, any well-developed mentoring program in 3 systems, so that they are still struggling. Although they
Can I add one point?
Okay, please.
It may be different from many other case studies like Hong Kong, Taiwan, or even South Korea. One of the most important reasons is that a majority of these international faculty members receive their final degrees from Japanese university or did postdoc research in Japan. It is 7.
Okay, good.
So, and they do not need any mentor because they were trained and educated before they were hired in their current affiliations. They spent, some of them spent more than 10 years in Japanese universities. I think this is very important, which might be different from the other case studies. Thank you.
Makes sense. And they are familiar with the academic system already, so that they don't need mentor in Japanese international academic environment. Okay, thank you. We have last one, and I will be happy to invite Sophia to lead our final topics to discuss. Are you ready?
Okay.
Everybody one chance to lead.
All right. Okay.
One topic.
Well, the last one is adjustment strategies and the future career plan. It's very interesting to know that most of the international faculty, they were relied on the administrative staff or the research assistant to handle their teaching and the research, especially in the processing the paperwork. As has been heard many times. I don't know how many forms they have to fill out, but they just keep complaining that. It's not a bilingual. So, and the other one is they will rely on the Google Translate app. This is not the friendly campus, you have to help themselves. And also, but they will say that because they are using the app, that the Google app. So sometimes maybe the directly or indirectly, some important information will be missed or ignored. So they have been called many times, say, hey, you forget to say something or respond something. That's because they think that's not important. And for the marriage couple, for the marriage faculty member here, they say that the family members are the greatest support for them. So in other words, if the international faculty members stayed in Taiwan more than 5 years, they got married. They married the Taiwanese woman. They set up their house here. So that's why none of them want to leave Taiwan. They want to stay here forever because they have their own family here. And this is another interesting culture. I think the Chinese culture has influence for the international faculty member. For the Vietnamese and also the American faculty member, because they got their doctorate degree in Taiwan. So they regard their advisor as their best supporter and also the mentor. They are the mentor. So even for the Vietnamese professor, he said being a father a day, a father for life. Has been influenced by the Chinese culture here. I think that's very interesting. And about the research collaboration, just like I think it's I forget it. It's Futao. Futao said that. They always work with the friends or the colleagues from their previous university or their own country's professors, rather than have the team with the Taiwanese colleague. And another one is just ignored it or the neglect. This is not a positive way to do that, but I heard 2 of them to say that. the last one is for the future career plan. I think all of them, the first number one is want to stay here because and even want to serve until the retirement. And no one want to transfer to private university or even serve in the private sector. But for the foreign assistant professor, because they're still young, so they kind of are still looking for the opening position or maybe another good research environment, I mean, in their hometown, in their home country. So they still want to go back. I think this is the finding I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Li-fang, would you share your own data with us? Oh, Li-fang, Professor Zhang, would you like to share?
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Shin. Yeah, since I have another Zoom meeting, we have our MED orientation today beginning at 5 o'clock. So I won't be polite. I'm just going to jump ahead. So there are two sides of the adjustment. Neither of them is really a serious problem here. In terms of adjusting to life in Hong Kong society in general, really there's no clear strategy emerged from our data. Our participant mentioned that they just fit in daily life in Hong Kong rather quickly and they record no difficulty. In terms of adjusting to their work at Hong Kong U, most participants had a very good formal or informal mentorship that they offer, that would offer them necessary information and advice, especially when they first came. Again, really no major difficulty was recorded in adjusting to different aspects of professional life here. As for future career plans, all participants plan to stay in the academia, first of all, and secondly, they plan to stay in Hong Kong, at least for quite a long time in their foreseeable future. However, relocation had been considered by several of the 10 participants for the following reasons. One, of course, is to avoid retirement. At the moment, we retire at the age of 60, but if you're a full professor, you can apply for extension maximum to 65. So that's something, a disadvantage here in Hong Kong. Of course, in due course, I hope that would change. Secondly, our participants, those who mentioned this in terms of the possibility of relocation in maybe a long time, eventually, is to enjoy a more affordable and comfortable life after retirement. I think it's related to the first point. And lastly, if the political situation in Hong Kong get worse, that will be something that some of our participants would consider to leave. So, but these participants only regarded relocation as a possibility in the very, very remote future. And they were mainly considered, if they leave, they would consider Western countries. I think that's about it. In terms of the significance of their experiences being in Hong Kong here for their career development, most of our participants believe that their experience in Hong Kong U is an advantage if they were to find new jobs in the future, citing the university's ranking and its academic reputation. However, one participant did express concerns over universities in general in Hong Kong because they are usually misunderstood, sometimes still a mystery to the outside world. They tend to be discriminated against, especially in Western countries. And the social events in recent years might have worsened their image in the world. So I guess that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll stay until maybe in a few more minutes. I have to leave to switch in, to tune in into another one. Just in case, I want to thank you again and good to see you.
Thank you very much. We will contact you later for paper writing about this topic. Okay. We'll contact you later.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Our paper writing together. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. yeah, I'll stay on for another couple of minutes.
Okay. Next, Futao, Professor Wang.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Your turn.
So we have moved to the last fourth topic.
Last one, fourth one.
That is adjustment strategies and future career plans.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it seems that they were interesting, and because I interviewed with 9, the participants, and similar different opinions, observations. For example, 2 of them mentioned they should learn Japanese language, and one of them even mentioned, when I first come to Japan, and my main strategy was to learn Japanese as quickly as possible and as natural as possible. So, and this is my secret. But only one of them mentioned the importance of learning Japanese language as an international faculty working in Japan. And one of them mentioned that try not to complain and look for the positive and seek to enjoy the best that Japan has to offer. Very positive person. And another young academic from the UK, and he mentioned that just going out and meeting people and being friendly, that's my strategy, both at work and outside of work. And one of them coming from East Asian countries, and mentioned the importance of try to make good publications. That is, mention importance of being research productive. Okay, then research productivity is very important if you want to be recognized. And also, one of them who come from France. I'm not putting much effort just to life in Japanese society, as I'm already familiar with the culture. And he told me that there's no need for him to make any strategies to be more adjustable. But one female academic mentions that, and he suffered even stress from her work. And she mentioned that I paid a live culture for half a year, read some books about Japanese workplace, talk to people I trust. And it's unbelievable because she spent at least 10 years in Japan, and she was graduated from a very famous Japanese university. I don't know why, because it suffered a lot from her work. And this is the first part of findings based on interviews. The second part is about future career plan, sorry. And among the 9 participants, 5 of them mentioned that they would stay in Japan until they retired. One of the reasons is because, as I mentioned earlier, and I think that Japan is a very nice country, and they're very satisfied with their current life, and 6 of them were married to local people, like married to Japanese women. But 2 of them who were very young academics from European countries, one from the United States and the other from a European country. And they had a flexible plan because they were young. They have not obtained a tenure tracking position. They're hired based on a 7-year contract. So they said, we are not sure of our future. But just one man mentioned it, and probably, and he will come back to his home country. This is just a general report of main findings from interviews focusing on the 2 sub-themes. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Futao. And lastly, Rachel, would you make a short one? Because we are almost 6 o'clock by some time.
I will be very quick with this finding. One of the biggest research, the major adjustment strategy was to collaborate with Korean researchers and colleagues. Such a strategy was found mostly from international faculty in science and engineering. So they were able to get help from their colleagues in terms of getting research funding and also getting the students from their colleagues. Support and help from students and assistants were the biggest source of help to get them through with their life in Korean universities. And also many interviewees mentioned the importance of mentorship support. However, some of them mentioned about the quality of mentorship because some of the mentors were not very devoted or committed to take care of the novice international faculty. So they mentioned that such mentorship program should be more institutionalized at the department or institutional level. Lastly, one of the major adjustment strategy was their effort and attitude to adjust towards Korean culture. One of the international faculty from US mentioned that he said that I am not trying to bring US into Korea. I should follow what was done in Korea. So he mentioned that's one of the biggest challenge strategy for him to adjust to his life in Korea. Lastly, as for future career plans, out of 10 interviewees, 6 interviewees wanted to stay until they retire in Korea. 2 of them were flexible. 2 of them had definite intention to leave. And the biggest reason was to seek for better research environment and better institutional reputation, and also to exercise more influence as a faculty member. So that being excluded was one of the big factor for him to leave Korean university. So that's all for Korean case. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish we have more time to discuss and take some questions from floor, but the time is almost over now. So I will turn to our chairperson, Professor Li-fang.
Thank you, Professor JC and Professor Huang, Professor Ho, Professor Lim, and also Professor Zhang has left. We still have a few minutes for a quick question from the floor. For anyone, any points, any?
Can I add anything?
Yes, please.
Yeah, very briefly, and some the preliminary finding based on case of study Japan. Seems that because JC has raised very good questions. Raised very good research questions. Based on case of Japan, seems that we could reach some preliminary conclusions. For example, first, factors like country of origin or discipline have no obvious impact on their adjustment. This is the first point based on the case study of Japan. Second, neither does a ranking of their affiliations have an obvious impact on their adjustment. Nothing to do with their affiliation. Third point, it is final. However, their pre-experience of Japanese language and Japanese culture, their family, that is their partnership, the country of origin and age have relatively remarkable impact on their adjustment. I think these seem to be 3 main preliminary findings from the case study of Japan. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Huang. Dr. Nick, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi everyone. My name is Nick Norma. I'm from Universiti Sains Malaysia. Very interesting presentation. But I came in a little bit late. Maybe I missed something. But can you, from this research, did you also try to find out why did these expatriates academics from foreign lands came to Korea and Japan? Did you ask why did they venture into this academic world in another countries? Did you ask that question, and what are the answers? And also I would like to ask a question to Professor Futao Huang. How long did you take to speak Japanese fluently? Thank you.
I think the first question might be to Rachel. Could you make a short answer, because that was our first topic to present today, right?
Okay, so we did ask interviewees about their motivation to pursue their academic career in East Asian countries. And there were a very diverse set of factors, but the major factors were about the poor job market conditions in their home country. And some of them wanted to advance their career opportunities with tenured track position or to work in a more prestigious institution. And also some were married to Korean or Japanese or Taiwanese spouse. So the family reasons were one of the big factors for them to come to the new country. I think, and also some of them had prior educational and work experience in that country. So that naturally led them to stay in their country for academic position. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. What's the question? Would you repeat? And I missed.
Professor Huang, she was asking how long does it take for you to learn Japanese?
Oh, you know, and this is a very good program between the Japanese government and Chinese government since the late 1980s. So every year, the Chinese government dispatches about 8 graduate students to Japan. And at the same time, the Japanese government sends out around 8 Japanese graduates to Chinese universities. So I came to Japan based on that program. Before we came to Japan, we already received some, we call it intensive Japanese training program for about 10 months. So Japanese government established a preparatory Japanese language school in China. And the Chinese government invested money in some of the Japanese universities, focusing on providing training programs for local Japanese students to learn Chinese. So it takes us about 10 months to have a mastery of Japanese language. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the question. I think that was very apt. I think Professor Huang is a classic example of a foreign academic who has settled very well in Japan. And just last point, I think, to add on what Professor Huang has said, and this is coming from my personal experience being in a foreign context when I spent a year being an academic in Kazakhstan. I think the role of language and the use of the language, how you actually use that language, the local language, is actually very, very important. For people like me who is in the social science, I find that it's a huge disadvantage when I cannot speak Russian, because research just cannot go on. You cannot forever rely on the translator to be doing research. Whereas my colleagues in the sciences do not have that problem at all, because everyone was speaking the same scientific language in their publications and things like that. So I guess that would, and very interesting. Thank you for sharing this study. I think the 4 countries are very, very interesting cases, very unique in each of this. And lastly, I just want to thank Professor JC and Hera for participating in this, for taking the lead on this 2 panel and making my job as the moderator. I think this is possibly the easiest ever moderator job I had in this. So once again, thank you very much, and looking forward to see you all, and everyone stay safe. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Sidi. Thank you, everyone.
Can we just turn on our camera and have a group photo?
Sure. Futao has some talk. Would you like?
No, I'm fine. Thank you. I just want to express my gratitude to all of you, especially Jesse and CD and my colleagues from Taiwan, and Hong Kong, and South Korea, and other countries, of course, hosting country, Malaysia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. Bella, over to you. Can you take us through this?
Yep. Are we all ready for the photo?
You did it.
Yep. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Right. We're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I think especially to USM staff, I'll be posting the QR code for you to scan for my CPD. I'll be putting it in the chat right?
Okay, yeah, this
Thank you very
announcement
much.
is only for staff of the university as a sort of the continuous professional development points. All right.
Okay.
There will be one more session tomorrow. It's a UNESCO session on socially responsible university. It's at 11:30 Malaysian time. That's the only one session tomorrow on socially responsible higher education. So it's 11:30 to 1:30 tomorrow at Malaysian time. So feel free to join us. Look forward to see you all. Take care.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Robin.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Here. Bye-bye. Rachel, I just sent the information for you, recording according to the demographic data you want.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I received it this morning. Thank you so
Yes.
much. So
No,
now,
I will give you more detail because my assistant have done that, so I can give you their background for you.
okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Sidi, take care of yourself.
Thank you very much.
Very
See you.
hardworking.